like long, like biker shorts. And someone came up to me and they're like, "Can you wear more of a leotard?" You know, and I was like looking around. I was like a child, and there were all these women around me, and I was like, "Okay, sure." And then there was another. The next day was like the final sort of presentation, and they had picked girls from all across the country. There were probably about 50 of us there, and we did combinations on the steps, and they made a cut, and then we sang, and they made a cut, and then we danced again, and they made a cut, and then there were like 24 of us, and they stood us in a line across the front of the stage, and they asked 6 girls to leave, and there were 18 of us on the stage, and Tommy Tune said, "You are the cast of the first national tour of the Will Rogers Follies." And I was like, "What am I doing here? How did I get here?" And I was
And you hadn't
17.
even seen the show yet.
Never seen the show. 17 years old.
And then
But I was inspired by the Tony Awards.
Were you able?
We like
were you able to graduate from high school then?
I did graduate. Yeah. I had to ask permission from my principal if I could go on tour. I was, in all the shows, so they knew that this was something that
you really
I really wanted. Yeah. And of course, my parents knew that I really wanted, and they let me go. And I was able to finish high school through correspondence.
So did your parents ever say to you, well, have something to fall back on, like get a teaching degree just in case this showbiz thing doesn't work out?
They never did. Really? Oddly, I think they believed more in me than I believed in myself, which is rare, I think. They really were unbelievably supportive, never pushy, but they were very, very supportive about me really going full throttle, and I feel really lucky. They've been amazing.
Well, they probably knew that you had it in your heart that you really wanted to do it. Yeah. What sort of professional training had you had at that point when you were 17? Had you been taking dance lessons?
I've been taking dance lessons since I was like 4 years old, and primarily most of my experience was training was through it, just experience from doing shows. I'd never really taken voice lessons. I take them now. I started taking voice lessons really before I started doing Millie. Because I knew it would be a very difficult undertaking to do such a large role. But most of my training has been just learning as I go.
Now, what year was this you went on tour? And then between then and 2002 when Millie opened on Broadway, what was going on in your life between the tour of Will Rogers and Millie?
Right. I went on tour 92, 93, and the tour played Detroit, Michigan when I graduated high school, so I was able to walk with my class.
Wow.
And they gave me a night off to go to my prom.
Aww.
It was ridiculous, So I left the tour to go to college. I went to Carnegie Mellon, and then after a year I left because I wasn't ready to learn anything, and I was 19 years old, and I was stubborn.
Had a taste of touring the
I know,
country,
and it's like I didn't want anyone telling me what to do or how to, I was 18, 19. I wish I could go back now because now I want to learn everything. But at 18, you're like big-headed and stupid, and you don't know, you don't even know what you want. And I moved home with my family. At that time they were living in Memphis, Tennessee. I lived there for about 8 months. Had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was looking at schools. I was thinking, I'll go study biology. I was like, what else did I like? I was like, what else did I enjoy?
But you hadn't just decided you were ready to move to New York and start auditioning, even after that national tour experience?
I was totally, I was sort of lost, I mean, I think everyone sort of goes through that. I think
certainly
it's
at
natural.
that age, a lot of people don't know what they wanted to do.
Yeah, and I didn't know. And I didn't know if I could handle it because it's terrifying, It's like the unknown, So after about 9 months living with my parents, I decided to go visit my brother. And he was doing Grease, the revival of Grease with Rosie O'Donnell.
In New York.
In New York. So I flew
Also Jeff Calhoun's show.
Also Jeff Calhoun's show. And this is the story. So I flew up to visit my brother, and they were having an open call for the national tour of Grease. And I decided to go. And the night before, Hunter and his wife, Jen Cody, who's also in the business and was also in Grease, taught me like the dance combination. So I'm in their apartment. I'm learning the dance combination for Grease, like preparing to go in for this open call. And I go in, and I get kept, and I sing. And at the end of my song, of course, Jeff Calhoun is there, and he's like, how are you? I haven't seen you in forever, And I'm like, I know. They hired me on the spot for the national tour of Greece. I burst into tears because here I am, 19, lost. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I fly up. I go on this for a whim, and it's as if the universe was like, here. And in 4 days, I was in San Francisco on the national tour of Greece, which I stayed with for a year. And then I was an understudy for Marty, Rizzo, and Sandy, and then eventually played the role of Sandy. And then they asked me to play Sandy on Broadway for 3 weeks, and I made my Broadway debut playing Sandy in Greece on Broadway.
Wow. That must have been so exciting then, be on Broadway in a show.
With my brother.
And working. And with your brother.
So my first bow on a Broadway stage, my first curtain call, my brother was next to me. Because that's the way it was set up. So I was like, how did this happen? So it was really cool.
Wow, that really... If somebody were to write that, you'd say that would never happen in real life.
I know. I every day I realize how lucky I am. Very, very lucky.
Well, people listening who aspire to be in the business must think, boy, this sounds so easy. She's
no.
17, she gets this thing. She's 19, she gets that.
Well, it's a lot of, it's a lot of luck.
Mm-hmm.
It's some talent, but a lot of tenacity, a lot of nerve. I mean, you have to be fearless. Like I went to this audition, and just, I wasn't afraid, Now, after Greece, I did the 20th anniversary of Annie, and then the Scarlet Pimpernel, and I was working pretty consistently after that. Les Mis came next, and then Millie.
But Millie's a very different story than we spoke earlier, where in the case of Little Women, of course, it was you'd expressed interest, they expressed interest in you, they even waited a little while so they could accommodate your schedule. You were, at that point, a Tony Award winner.
Right.
It was very...
Yeah, people were asking me my opinions on things as opposed to me begging people to give me a job.
A slightly different story with Millie.
Yeah,
so tell us about coming into Millie.
Well, Millie, I'd heard... Again, it was one of those things I had heard through the rumor mill that they were thinking about turning Thoroughly Modern Millie, this movie, into a stage musical. And again, I called my agent and said... I've heard that they're doing this musical of Millie, and if they're, having any auditions, he's like, I haven't heard anything about it. And about 3 weeks later, he called me, he's like, you're right, they are, and you have an audition. You're going to go in and audition. And it was for a reading, like very, very beginning of the reading. And I was terrible. It was horrible, horrible, horrible. But somehow they gave me an ensemble slot. And I was like, oh. So I sat in the back, and I was so excited, and I thought it was so funny, and I thought it was just amazing. And then they saw something in me sort of in the back. I was and usually in readings, there's like the front row of chairs are all the principals, and in the back row are the ensemble members. And somehow the creative team saw something in me, because when they were doing the next sort of round of workshops, they called me in for Millie. And I was like, really? And I wanted it so badly. And sometimes when you want something so bad, you can't even do it because you want it so badly. So I basically just overshot it because I wanted it so bad. And so they didn't hire me for Millie. And I was like, okay. And then another round came. They were doing the La Jolla production, and they called me back in to do Millie again.
But you were already hired for the ensemble at this point.
I wasn't.
Oh,
that was just for the workshop.
That was just a workshop.
Ensemble, yeah.
So it's just sort of, I guess, it was a long process of auditions. I mean, I must have auditioned over like 7 times.
And in the midst of this, they were doing various readings and workshops with various people attached. Kristen Chenoweth was involved at one point.
Lots of people. And I was doing Les Mis on the road, so I was flying in from the road to audition. And I auditioned in L.A. They did some auditions in L.A., and I flew back to New York. And I remember once I missed a flight, and I'm crying in the airport because I couldn't get there to audition, and I wanted it, It's crazy, like what I went through sort of to be seen for the show, and then the way it all turned out.
But finally, the La Jolla production, the first production.
I auditioned and again for Millie, and was down to like the very end, between me and like 5 other women, and didn't get it. And I was disappointed, and I was walking around the city one day, and I called my agent, and I said, if they need an understudy, I would be thrilled to do it. And he was like, I'll call them. 5 minutes later, he said, they would love you to be the understudy. And I said, that would just be great. And then I'd finished the road of Les Mis at that time. So then about a month later, Les Mis called and said, we want you to play Eponine on Broadway permanently. offering me the highest salary I'd ever